All right, ready to dive in. Today we're going deep on something we all see all the time, but probably don't think too much about. The color of water.
Yeah, it's easy to just see like blue, green, brown, the basics. But what we're really getting into today is how those colors can be like warning signs or clues about the health of water, even the history of a whole planet's worth of water.
And getting us started on this is an article, The Hidden Science Behind Water's Stunning or Murky Colors. It's from Wake Forest University, and honestly, it's made me look at every puddle and pond totally differently.
Right, that's what I think is so cool about this. We always think of pure water as being clear, but in nature, there's almost always something else in there creating these colors, these clues. Like you said, it's like detective work.
So before we get into the whole rainbow of colors out there, can we just back up a sec? Why isn't all water just, see-through? Like it's just H2O.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, in its purest form, water is clear. But out there in the world, water is almost never pure. It's like constantly mixing with stuff in the environment, picking up little pieces of things. I mean, think about it. Rain runs off the land, picks up bits of dirt, leaves, even pollutants, and all that stuff flows into rivers, lakes, oceans, you name it.
So water is this giant collector, holding on to traces of everything it touches.
Exactly. And all those tiny particles, scientists call them dissolved and suspended matter, they change how the light interacts with the water. And that's where the color comes in. That's the magic.
Okay, so we've got the ingredients for color, all this stuff floating around in the water. So let's talk about the light show.
Sunlight, as you probably know, it's made up of all the colors of the rainbow, right? And each of those colors has a different wavelength. So when sunlight hits the water, the particles can either absorb some of those wavelengths or scatter them around.
Okay, I'm trying to picture this. So absorption is like certain wavelengths, certain colors just get sucked up by the particles, kind of like a filter.
Perfect. That's a great way to think about it. Now, scattering, that's a little different. Imagine light bouncing off all those particles, like tiny mirrors sending light every which way. And get this, the size and type of particles actually determine which wavelengths, which colors scatter most. That's how we get different colors.
Let me see if I'm getting this. The color we actually see is like the leftovers, the wavelengths that weren't absorbed PLUS, the ones that got bounced back to our eyes in a certain way.
You got it. It's like a fingerprint, unique to that specific water at that specific moment.
That's so cool. Okay, let's try this out with a real-world example. The article talks about the Missouri River, which they call Big Muddy, which kind of gives away the color, right?
Right, and that name tells you a lot. Think about what the Missouri carries. Tons and tons of sediment, especially this fine silt and clay, from all across those huge plains it flows through. Now, those particles, they tend to absorb almost all the wavelengths of light, except for the yellows and reds. And those are the ones that get scattered back, making the river that muddy brown color.
So it's not just that the water is dirty, it's that the specific stuff in it creates that specific color.
Exactly. Now, let's flip to something completely different. Think about Crater Lake, famous for that crazy, intense blue.
Oh yeah, Crater Lake, it's like the definition of pure water. So what's going on there? It can't just be the lack of mud, right?
You're right, it's more than that. Crater Lake gets that incredible blue from the way pure water itself plays with light. Even without a bunch of sediment, water molecules scatter blue light more than other colors. And Crater Lake being so deep also helps. Blue light can travel further down in the water than other colors.
So that blue is a sign of how pure the water is.
Exactly. It's so pure, scientists use it as like the gold standard for measuring how clear water is all over the world.
Wow, so we've got muddy brown showing a sediment, deep blue for purity. I'm already seeing water in a totally different way.
That's what this whole deep dive is about. And we're just getting started. There's a whole spectrum of colors out there, and every single one has a story to tell.
Okay, I'm totally into this whole watercolor detective thing now. So we've got muddy brown, we've got deep blue. But what about, that classic turquoise? The kind you see in, every travel brochure ever, those amazing tropical beaches.
Oh, yeah, the perfect paradise water. It's funny because to get those turquoise colors, you actually need a mix of a few things we've already talked about.
So it's not just one thing, it's like the perfect combination.
Exactly. First, you need that really clear water like we were talking about with Crater Lake, where the blue light scattering is super strong. But then you add in shallow water and a white sand bottom, and that white sand is key because it reflects the light back up, making those blue and green wavelengths even stronger.
Oh, I see. It's like the white sand is a giant mirror, making that blue we already see even brighter, like nature's Instagram filter.
Haha, that's a great way to put it. That's exactly why those shallow, clear waters, especially over white sand, give you those crazy, vibrant turquoise colors we all love in those tropical pictures.
Okay, so we've got brown, blue, turquoise. What about when things start to get a little, well, green?
Green is usually a sign of life in the water, specifically chlorophyll. It's the stuff that plants use to grab sunlight for photosynthesis, and in water, the biggest chlorophyll producers are algae.
Right, algae. But I thought there were different kinds of algae, like some are good, right? So how do we know if that green is a good sign or bad sign?
You're right, not all algae are bad. Some are super important for the ecosystem, like the bottom of the food chain. But when you see that really intense green, sometimes it even looks like pea soup, that's usually a sign of too much algae, what we call an algal bloom.
And those blooms usually happen when there's like too many nutrients in the water, right?
Exactly. Stuff like runoff from farms, fertilizer and stuff, or sewage overflows, even just fertilizer from people's lawns. All that washes into the water, and it's got tons of nitrogen and phosphorus, which algae love. It's like dumping a whole bag of fertilizer on your garden. You'll get a ton of growth, but it might not be the best in the long run.
So, too much of a good thing, basically.
Exactly. And these blooms can cause some real problems. I mean, the water looks gross and can smell bad, and some types of algae, like that blue-green algae, can actually make toxins that are dangerous for people and animals.
That's definitely not the kind of green you want to see. The article mentions High Rock Lake in North Carolina as an example of this, right?
Yep. High Rock Lake has been having more and more of these really bad algal blooms. It's turning the water bright green, and people are getting worried about the water quality and whether it's safe to be around.
I'm guessing scientists aren't just looking at the water to figure out what's going on, right?
Nope. They're using some pretty high-tech stuff. They're using satellites to track these blooms from space to see how big they are and how fast they're spreading. And they're also taking water samples to see what kinds of algae are there and how much toxin is in the water.
Wow, they can actually watch the lake changing colors from space? That's incredible.
It is. This kind of monitoring lets scientists and water managers track the problem and warn people if they need to. It also helps them figure out what's causing the blooms in the first place so they can try to stop them from happening.
Okay, so we've got muddy brown for sediment, deep blue for clean water, turquoise for clear, shallow water, and green, which could be good or bad depending on what kind of algae is in there. What about water that's really dark, like almost black?
That usually means there's a lot of dissolved organic matter in the water. Basically, it's stuff like decaying leaves, wood, other plant and animal matter, all broken down in the water, kind of like brewing a giant cup of tea.
So it's like nature's compost pile, but underwater.
Pretty much. All that organic stuff absorbs a lot of the light, so there's not much left to bounce back to our eyes. That's why those waters look so dark, almost black.
I've seen lakes like that, especially in places with lots of trees. It's actually really beautiful in a mysterious kind of way.
I agree. And those dark waters might not be great for swimming, but they're often full of life, with lots of interesting creatures that have adapted to living in those conditions.
This whole watercolor spectrum is so fascinating. It's like a secret code that tells us what's happening under the surface.
I know, right? And the more we learn to read that code, the better we can understand water quality, how healthy the ecosystems are, and how we're impacting all these important resources.
This has been so eye-opening, honestly. Like, I've always seen water, obviously, but I never really thought about it this way.
I know what you mean. It's like when you learn the science behind something, suddenly you see it everywhere in a totally different way.
We've gone from, like, muddy brown rivers to that incredible blue of Crater Lake, from those picture-perfect turquoise beaches to the algae green. We even talked about those kind of spooky black waters. It's wild how each color tells a whole story about what's going on in the water.
And it's not just pretty colors, right? I mean, understanding what those colors mean can help us actually protect water. Like, imagine being able to see a problem starting, like one of those algal blooms, just because you notice the water changing color.
Yeah, it's like a built-in warning system.
Exactly. And that's where everyone comes in, We can all be citizen scientists helping to keep an eye on our local water.
So what can we actually do? Should we all, like, walk around with color charts, trying to match the exact shade of the lake down the street?
No, it doesn't have to be that complicated. The most important thing is just to pay attention. Next time you're near some water, just take a minute to look at it. I mean, really look at the color. Is it clear? Is it that really bright blue? Or is it kind of murky, maybe a little green?
And then think about what we've learned today. Like, what could be making it that color? Is it just natural stuff from the surrounding area? Could it be algae starting to grow? or maybe something completely different?
Those are the right questions to ask. You're already thinking like a scientist. And if you see something weird, like if the color changes suddenly, tell someone, report it to your local environmental agency. You might be the first one to catch a problem before it gets really bad.
That's actually pretty cool to think we can make a difference just by paying attention.
You absolutely can. Knowing stuff, it gives you power. The more we understand about the world, the better we can take care of it.
So before we wrap things up, I want to give everyone a little challenge, something to think about.
Oh, I like a challenge. What is it?
Go find some water. Any kind of water. A lake, a river, even a puddle in your yard after it rains. Look at the color. Really look at it. And ask yourself, what is this water trying to tell me?
I love that. It seems so simple, but it can make you really curious, start asking all sorts of questions.
And maybe it'll inspire us to keep learning about that whole hidden world under the surface. A world we now know is full of color and mystery. Until next time, happy exploring.